Russia is by far the most advanced foreign adversary sending manipulative messages over social media. They're even more nuanced today than they were in 2016, and we are no more prepared today than we were in 2016. Hey Wired, I'm Sinan Aral. I'm the David Austin Professor of Management at MIT, Director of MIT's Initiative on the Digital Economy, and author of The Hype Machine about how social media disrupts our world. And I'm here to debunk some myths about the role of social media in elections and specifically in the upcoming election of 2020. Social media sways elections. Did Russia sway the election of 2016? We know they sent manipulative messages to 126 million people on Facebook, 20 million on Instagram, and 10 million tweets. Do these things sway the election? There's really three things to know. Does it change vote choice? Does it change voter turnout? And is the reach, scope, and targeting of misinformation or campaign information enough to sway an election? Voter choice is simply who you choose to vote for given that you're voting. Do you vote for Republicans or Democrats? That's a vote choice. The evidence on vote choice is relatively clear. Social media messaging and digital advertising in general has a very small to negligible to zero effect on vote choice. Voter turnout, on the other hand, is do you choose to vote at all, and the number of people who vote in an election. And there, the evidence is a little bit scarier in the sense that large-scale experiments have shown that social media messages, digital advertising, can have statistically significant effects on voter turnout. Facebook ran an experiment with 61 million people in it in 2010, which showed that with a simple message, they could create votes in congressional elections that wouldn't have happened without their message. They replicated that experiment in 2012 and demonstrated again the ability for social media to create voter turnout. Many studies indicate how digital messaging can get out the vote, and that's an important part of changing or swaying elections. Targeting is who you direct digital social media messages to, which populations, in which regions, and which districts in the voting electorate. The evidence in 2016 indicated that Russian interference was targeted at swing states and that the reach and scope of it was large enough to affect voters in a way that could change the election through voter turnout. In addition, we know that a lot of the manipulative messages sent by Russia in 2016 were about voter suppression. Voter suppression memes tend to be targeted at specific communities. So, for instance, we know that in 2016, on Instagram in particular, African American voters were targeted with voter suppression memes, indicating, for example, Hillary Clinton is not a fan of the black voter and therefore we should stay home, or there's really no one to vote for in this election, there's no reason to vote. Those types of memes were targeted through @mentions at communities that were African American or, in this year's election, followed the Black Lives Matter movement and so on, trying to suppress specific communities of voters in key swing states. The number one culprit in spreading misinformation and voter suppression memes in 2016 and likely in 2020 is Russia. While Russian misinformation was scary in the 2016 election, they are much more sophisticated today than they were 4 years ago. In addition, this is happening during a global pandemic with civil unrest in the streets arising from the justifiable social movements against police brutality in the United States. With all of this uncertainty, we are at a dramatic risk for foreign interference in our election in 2020. And of course, social media is nowhere near the only factor affecting elections. Certainly, the candidates, their charisma, their policies, advertising, their ability to connect with voters, as well as news of the day, what is hitting the pocketbooks and the homes and families of everyday voters, obviously has the largest effect. Social media spreads fake news faster than the truth. That's true. We did a 10-year longitudinal study of all of the verified true and false news that spread on Twitter between 2006 and 2017. In fact, we found that false news was 70% more likely to be retweeted, and false news traveled about 6 times faster than true news online. Fake news is not a new term. It was not invented by Donald Trump. In fact, it first appeared, I believe, in a Harper's Magazine news story, and we've had the concept of falsity in journalism for many years and decades prior to today. The thing that makes today different, however, is the speed and breadth and depth with which social media can spread fake news so much faster than the truth online, and how that can be targeted at specific individuals and communities, creating separate realities for people who are seeing one type of news in one community and a different type of news in a different community. So when we found these results in our Twitter data, the natural next question for us was why? Why does fake news spread so much farther, faster, deeper, and more broadly than the truth? And what we came up with was what we called the novelty hypothesis. So if you read the cognitive science literature, you know that human attention is drawn to novelty, new things in the environment. And if you read the sociology literature, you know that we gain in status when we share novel information because it makes us look like we're in the know or that we have inside information that other people don't have. So these two factors make it more likely that we share novelty. So when we check the novelty of true and false news compared to everything that a given individual on Twitter had seen in the 2 months prior, we found that indeed false news was way more novel than the truth. And when we checked the replies to true and false tweets to see how people were expressing sentiment about what they were reading, we found that indeed, in reply to false news, people expressed surprise, anger, and disgust, while in reply to true news, they expressed anticipation, joy, and trust. So the surprise confirmed our novelty hypothesis that yes, false news is more novel. People spread more novel information more often than less novel information, and people were genuinely surprised by fake news. Voting booths are not hackable. False. Voting booths can be hacked, have been hacked, and abnormal ballot results in a number of examples over the last decade or so in the United States. Many people believe that because the United States has a federalist system in which each state tallies its votes in its own way, uses different computer systems, that there's no centralized tallying of ballots, that this somehow protects the American voting system from hacking at the voting booth itself. But that's not true. It just means that there are 50 different types of systems that a hacker can attack. So for instance, we know that in 2016, a hacker named Cyberzeist hacked the Alaska voting systems and claimed that he could change the voting tallies in any direction that he wanted in Alaska. There are also a number of myths surrounding voting that are spreading on social media. The major one is that there is widespread voter fraud. There is no real evidence of a systematic voter fraud at the level of ballots or other types of voter fraud, people voting twice, dead people voting, and so on. Although there have been a very, very small handful of incidents that may have happened where there is an error on a ballot, there has been no evidence of systematic voter fraud since we can remember about elections in the United States. Which means that despite all of the myths floating around social media, we as citizens can be confident in the integrity of our elections. So my advice to all of us is that we vote and vote as quickly as possible ahead of November 3rd. Social media algorithms are dividing our society. There is evidence that recommendation algorithms that social media uses does tend to give us more of what we want and therefore lock us into narrower and narrower sets of information. Filter bubbles refers to the fact that in an algorithmic world, we are each living in our own information bubble. meaning that what I see on social media is not what you see and not what your friends see, because everything that you see is tailored to you, and it's tailored to you by algorithms that are designed to give you more of what you want to keep you engaged. That creates these filter bubbles of information that are unique to every individual. Echo chambers are groups or communities of people that are sharing the same information over and over again with each other, and that information stays locked in that community and doesn't cross over, for instance, to the other side of the aisle where different information is being constantly shared amongst a different set of people. So there are certain algorithms, for instance, the YouTube algorithm, that tends to recommend more and more of the type of content that you seem engaged with and interested in. Studies have shown that these types of algorithms can tend to lead to more extreme content being shown to the viewer. These algorithms are designed to be bottomless or endless, meaning they keep you engaged in a constantly updating reel of new videos, while the jury is out on whether this can radicalize someone or the degree to which there are systematic extremism outcomes that are created by these algorithms. The fact that they are sending you down rabbit holes of more and more content similar to what you like and engage with is troubling given the notion of the filter bubble. In order to fight the filter bubble, we have to seek out diverse content. We have to follow people whose opinions are different than our own. We have to do searches for content that is contrary to what we believe. We have to demonstrate to the hype machine, to the social media industrial complex, that we're interested in diversity and that we are seeking diversity or opinions that are different from our own. That will help us break out of the filter bubbles that we find ourselves in with these algorithms. You can easily spot a deepfake. Deepfakes are synthetic video that are generated by machine learning algorithms called generative adversarial networks. These networks have a generator and a discriminator, where the discriminator's job is to tell real from fake videos, and the generator tries to generate more and more convincing synthetic video till it fools the discriminator into believing that it's true. Now, the problem with deepfakes is that they're more difficult to spot every day that goes by. There are instances of audio deepfakes where companies have been defrauded out of millions of dollars, where the CFO will be called by a synthetic attacker that is using the voice of the CEO requesting that large sums of money be transferred before the end of the quarter or to close a deal. The reason why deepfakes are so troubling is because seeing is believing, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. I have seen some incredibly professionally created and convincing deepfakes, for instance, of President Barack Obama or Mark Zuckerberg or Prime Minister Boris Johnson or Kim Jong-un, that really kind of skate the line between is this convincing or is this not. As deep fakes become more commonplace, as the technology used to create them becomes more democratized and more people have access to it, I think we're going to see a rise of a wave of synthetic audio and video that could become very dangerous in a political environment or in a commercial environment, either through fraud or through political manipulation. I think the most effective way to spot a deep fake is to distinguish the content of what's being said in the film. If you can't imagine those words coming out of the mouth of the person that you're viewing, that is a good sign that this is a deep fake. Social media can bring about positive change. Most recently, we've been focused on the potential disasters that social media can create in our world, but it's important not to forget about the tremendous potential for promise that social media can also bring. We know, for instance, that when Nepal experienced the greatest earthquake that it's seen in 100 years, Facebook spun up a Donate Now button and raised $15.5 million from 770,000 people in over 100 countries, which just shows you the mobilization potential of this technology. It's certainly played a catalyzing and accelerant role in important social movements around the world, like Black Lives Matter, the Arab Spring, the Snow Revolution in Russia, social mobilization in Japan and Hong Kong. And these kinds of social movements can really be accelerated by social media. Research at MIT and at Stanford shows that Facebook creates $370 billion a year in consumer surplus in the United States alone. Imagine that for the entire world. That's economic opportunity, that's the ability to find jobs, access to life-saving health information, and real human connection. In some countries around the world, Facebook is the internet. It's the way that people conduct any number of human activities, from market transactions to running their businesses to staying in touch with their friends and family or finding out about where to vote or how to get health care. These types of benefits are actually tremendous. Social media is a very powerful tool for creating such change in society. The real question is, what are we going to use it for? Are we going to use it for the nefarious purposes that we've seen it be used for recently, or are we going to use it to bring about a better world?